I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe, who died in the cold on the lawn of another Boston police officer who was never investigated. But Karen Reed, John O'Keefe's boyfriend, was arrested, investigated, and indicted. Here's the story. On the night of January 28, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe and his girlfriend Karen Reed visited two bars in Canton, Massachusetts, C.F. McCarthy's and the Waterfall Bar and Grill. Later, they proceeded to an after-party at the home of fellow officer Brian Albert. Reed dropped O'Keefe off at Albert's residence but did not enter the house herself. The following morning, concerned by John O'Keefe's absence, Karen Reed, along with friends Jennifer McCabe and Kerry Roberts, searched for him. They discovered O'Keefe unresponsive in a snowbank outside of Brian Albert's home. Despite attempts at CPR, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. An autopsy revealed blunt force trauma and hypothermia as contributing factors to his death. Prosecutors allege that Reed, intoxicated, struck O'Keefe with her SUV and left him to die in the snow. Karen Reed maintains her innocence, asserting that John O'Keefe was attacked inside the house and that she is being framed. Her first trial ended in a mistrial, and now it's time for the retrial. So this is a murder trial, okay? It's a murder trial, and it's a boyfriend-girlfriend murder trial. Let's take the SUV and the murder weapon, everything else out of the way here. When we cover cases like this, domestic cases where it's boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, you try to examine the relationship between the two. Because for a boyfriend to murder a girlfriend, or a girlfriend to murder a boyfriend, or a husband to murder a wife to murder a husband, the jury wants to know why. Why would someone who's in a relationship with someone kill him? Why would they murder him? So that's what this case is. They don't get misled by the fact that the SUV is the alleged murder weapon, that it somehow changes that. To me, it doesn't. It's still about John O'Keefe and Karen Reed. Karen Reed's accused of taking John O'Keefe's life. Why on earth would she do it? So one way that you can kind of get some insight into what was happening between these two is their text messages. And it was a part of the trial the first time around. And I want you to take a listen to these text messages as they are read by two of our producers. And again, what we're trying to figure out is what's going on in this relationship.
Tell me if you're interested in someone else. Can't think of any other reason you've been like this.
Nope. Things haven't been great between us for a while. Ever consider that? Kids are here, not in the mood to talk.
So you're not into it anymore? That's fine. But I don't want to keep trying and you keep treating me like this. I'm trying to hug and kiss you this morning and you whack me in the face with a pillow. Last night you were basically like, yeah, what about it? When we talk about the future. So why don't you just admit you're not into it so much anymore?
Not how it went down, but okay.
Can you please admit your head is out of the game with us?
Sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now. So yeah, I'm not as quick to jump back into being lovey-dovey as you apparently. OMG, stop calling.
Then why would you start with me this morning? You're setting me up to fail. You started a number of fights from your end.
I've explained it a few times already. Not doing it again.
So you're not into this anymore?
Not into fighting all the time, correct?
If you're telling me you're interested in someone else, you will never hear from me again. You can have all the space in the world. I'm going to grab a drink in a bit. Can you please answer?
No, Karen. Not sure why you need to announce that you're grabbing a drink, but have fun.
Seeing if you want to meet me later. Okay, can you please call me for 2 minutes?
Not right now.
I'm going home. See you later. Your kids are alone. I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone.
Okay, let's talk about these text messages. It brings us to the first question in our investigation. What do these text messages prove? What are you taking away from them? What insight do they give us into the relationship, the status of the relationship between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe? And what connection, if any, does it have to murder? Joining us, longtime Massachusetts attorney. He was a prosecutor for 20 years, including as homicide chief in Norfolk County in a trial I covered many moons ago. Rick Grundy is with us, and on the phone, Karen Reed supporter. She's Nurse Kim on YouTube and TikTok. Kim Whalen also joining us. Great to have you both here. Rick, let me start with you. Look, what are you hearing in these text messages, the back and forth on the 28th, going into the 29th, between Karen Reed and John O'Keefe? Is this the stuff that murders are made of?
Well, obviously it can be a stretch from a strained relationship to a murder, but these are the stretches that occur regularly in homicides. And I think in these particular nuggets, what you hear is quite powerful, because it sounds like and starts as a particularized argument, disagreement centered on that particular evening, maybe going back to that morning. But what it then opens up is that this is part of a much larger discordance between the parties. Clearly, Ms. Reed is focused on whether there is someone else romantically on his mind or perhaps in his life already. It references that there has been a recently supposedly resolved rough patch that extended for some period of time, and he's not ready to jump back into all the lovey-dovey things. So I think it casts a long shadow not only on the here and now, but the past that precipitated to this. So it gives you a good taste of that relationship for more of an extended period of time than just these two texts going back and forth.
All right, Kim, what are you hearing in these text messages, the communications back and forth between John and Karen?
Yeah, thank you, Vinny, for having me back. I just wanted to clarify that I think all of us have had rough mornings. And I think that that's what this dramatic reenactment is hearkening back to. An argument regarding, breakfast items and things that are normal, mundane couple issues. We all have them. And unfortunately, this is being used against Karen in the fight of her life, trying to, make her stance as it relates to not being guilty, and this is what the Commonwealth has.
Okay, now, this has, Rick, this has become an issue now, these text messages, and how they'll be presented in court. I want to put this up on the screen. This is the response to this court's request for her written objection in response to the Commonwealth's request to use independent readers with regard to purported text messages exchanged between John O'Keefe and Karen Reed. The defense quickly objected to this inappropriate theater, especially given the high probability that such a staged delivery could be unduly prejudicial against Ms. Reed. So apparently, I guess prosecutors want independent readers, much like we did in what you just heard, to read these text messages. What are your thoughts? Rick, how is this usually done up in Massachusetts? Do you bring in dramatic readers to read the text messages to the jury?
Well, there certainly is precedent for doing that, and normally the circumstances are that you have an unavailable witness, and more often than not, that unavailable witness is unavailable because they're deceased. So the normal circumstances under which this arises is when there's, say, grand jury testimony, and the person actually came in, gave testimony. There was a prosecutor asking questions, and the witness was answering, and that witness is no longer available. Again, most prevalently, that's because they're deceased. And in those situations, it's a normal course to have somebody get into the stand and take those grand jury minutes, and the prosecutor in the case would read the question, and the person in the stand, assuming the role of the deceased party, would read them back. It's a little different here, although John O'Keefe is certainly an unavailable witness. It's similar in that sense. One point that the defense makes here is that these were never spoken words. These were always written words. So the jurors actually are getting the whole grain by virtue of getting the written document And the court's arguably giving you a little more, rather than take the time to have these jurors all read these individually, we're going to read them in front of the jury. So it's reading the text as opposed to reenacting what were oral words to different parties. And I think that's a notable difference. And obviously, as your demonstration showed, when you have a person reading it, and they're assigning emotion or a heightened voice to certain parts of it, as the punctuation calls for, it adds more to it than words on a paper.
Yeah. The other thing, Kim, sometimes text messages are misinterpreted, even by the people who are going back and forth amongst each other. It's so difficult to really understand the exact tone of a text message unless you're the one that wrote it and can explain it.
Oh, absolutely, 100%, Vinny. It is incredibly difficult for this position that the Commonwealth is requesting, and it must be agreed upon by the defense and the Commonwealth, because if someone gets in there and has inflection or changes any type of tone, there could be significant damage done to either side.
Yeah, I mean, there's damage done sometimes when people use all caps in a text message and don't do it on purpose. Like people, stop screaming at me. Like, I can see how text messages can easily, beyond anything else, be very misinterpreted. Okay, our guests are sticking around. Coming up next, why did the Bryans destroy their phones?
Destroy your phones. Destroy your SIM card.
Biggest trials of the year are here on Court TV. Live in the Arizona courtroom as convicted cult mom killer Lori Daybell represents herself.
She wanted to have her day in court, so here we are.
And in Massachusetts as Karen Reed faces a jury again.
She's not afraid to take the stand.
The trials everyone is talking about.
You wish that you could clarify?
He'll be clarified one day, Matt.
Are all on Court TV.
And you must not alter, delete, destroy, or in any way manipulate any of these electronic data associated with the cell phones at issue. Period, end quote. Did you receive a notice from the Commonwealth with that language?
I don't remember receiving that document, no.
Were you told in any other capacity that you were not to get rid of or delete your cell phone? In other words, preserve your phone.
Subsequent to me upgrading my phone, I spoke with the DA's office. So after that, they told me via a phone call that that was the case.
Okay, Brian Albert's phone, Brian Higgins' phone, both a big part of the first trial, will be a big part of this second trial. There he is on cross-examination. Let's take a look at a little more of that cross-examination of Brian Albert by Alan Jackson about his phone.
Have you ever had a conversation with Brian Higgins about your phones, respectively?
We may have.
Why, in June of 2023, did you testify, I know there were conversations about the phones with Brian Higgins, end quote?
I'm not sure of the context of that.
So now you just can't remember?
No, I don't think I could remember during that testimony either. I think if you read the whole thing, I think I said I'm not sure, I don't remember.
Your quote was, I know there were conversations about the phones. I just can't say if he said he was going to get rid of his phone or not, end
Right.
quote.
Right.
But Brian Higgins has also gotten rid of his phone.
I know at some point, Brian
Yes
Higgins,
or no, Mr. Albert?
did he?
Objection, Your Honor.
Can you answer that, yes or no, sir?
Yes.
Okay, brings us to the next question in our investigation, and it's about those phones, and it's about these two witnesses. Why did the Bryans, Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, destroy their phones? Here with us, former NYPD officer, retired Nassau County Lieutenant and Commanding Officer Mike Gould, and attorney Melanie Little. She's on YouTube. She is here as well. Great to see you all. All right, Melanie, why did the Bryans destroy their phones?
It's the question of the hour, isn't it, Vinny? I mean, the two third-party culprits that are left in this case, Brian Higgins and Brian Alberts, both destroy their phone around the same day, right before they're served with a preservation order. Not only did they destroy their phones, but they got new phone numbers. So is it a coincidence, or was it an intentional destruction of evidence? It's going to be something for the jury to decide, but something that Alan Jackson will sink his teeth into once again.
Let me ask you, Mike, is there any reason that you could think of that a member of law enforcement would want to destroy their phone when they get a new one?
Well, I certainly think it was intentional. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Oh, yeah, they definitely destroyed these phones on purpose. But why would a member of law enforcement do that? Is there a reason? I'm not a member of law enforcement. You were.
Right. So it's their personal cell phones, number one, and I'm assuming it's not a police department cell phone. And I'm sure there's a lot of things on there that they didn't want anybody to see. There was a big night of drinking and partying and past and present texting and sexting and all of these things amongst all of them. I just don't personally think it's as nefarious as it suggests. And I never really did buy into the conspiracy theory. So I think that there's problems on both sides of this, the prosecution and the defense. And of course, they have to make a thing. It certainly doesn't look good, but I don't think it's as nefarious. I think there's personal things in there that they didn't want anybody to find out about. And they decided, when they woke up the next day and said, what did we do last night? Try to figure out what the hell happened. They made this decision, which will ultimately be obviously a bad decision.
Let's take a listen to Brian Higgins here talking about his phone being cross-examined by David Yannetti.
In September of 2022, you were served with a preservation order for your phone, were you not?
Yes.
After September of 2022, you never received anything in writing that canceled or lifted that preservation order, correct?
That's correct.
After September of 2022, you made the decision to dispose of your phone without consulting anybody about the decision to throw out your phone, correct?
Yes.
You took the SIM card out of your phone, correct?
No, what I testified to was that it's...
Did you take the SIM card out of your phone, yes or no?
I don't know.
Did you testify that that's what you do when you get rid of phones, sir?
What I said was that might have been the extent of it if I was to have done that.
And you either cut up the SIM card or ripped it up, correct?
I believe what I testified to was
I would have... I'm not asking you what you testified to. I'm asking you today, did you either cut up the SIM card or rip it up?
Cut it up or broke it.
Okay, Melanie, from the defense perspective, how and why are the phones of these two men so significant?
Well, since they're both potential third-party culprits, the issue is that by destroying both of their phones, they essentially destroyed all communications between the two of them. And both being law enforcement, they both knew exactly what they were doing when they did that. And understand also, this was 9 months after the murder of John O'Keefe. And so it just leads to so much, as if there wasn't enough reasonable doubt in this case, so much more reasonable doubt.
So, Mike, what you were saying before is there might be other things on there, and you say it might not be as nefarious, but could there be other things on there that are sort of what got Trooper Michael Proctor fired from his job?
100%. Remember, we use cell phones today like we're just having normal conversations that are just back and forth. You're talking about everything about your personal life, your professional life. Again, these weren't, I don't believe, police department phones, which obviously should remain very sterile. You shouldn't mess with them. But it's their personal phone. I just feel that they, their whole lives, they had everything was this one night of partying has now turned into such a tangled web for so many people. And they made this decision. Definitely agree with Melanie. This was a bad decision. This does not look good. And for those of us, not those of us, but I mean, we have a thirst for conspiracy theories going back to Kennedy and 9/11. So for people that want to, see this as a conspiracy, this certainly is going to feed them that kind of tidbits of information, I don't think it's a conspiracy.
Melanie, how is the defense prejudiced by this?
Prejudiced by the two of them destroying their cell phones?
Not having access to any of that information.
Well, what Brian Higgins did do right away after, within the days after the murder, is he went to the FBI. He has a friend who worked there, his friend Matt Kelch, who's on the witness list for the defense. He showed Brian Higgins how to use the kiosk in the FBI building so that Brian Higgins could cherry pick the text messages between himself and Karen Reed. He then printed up all of those text messages on physical paper and brought them with him to give his statement to, I think it was Michael Proctor, who has other issues now, as you know. So, you know, the issue is also that Brian Higgins lied about making any phone calls the evening in the early morning hours of January 29th of 2022. And now all of a sudden some new video has surfaced of Brian Higgins on the phone outside the Sally Port at Canton PD. Had this video been turned over prior to the first trial or even during the first trial, Higgins would have been able to been impeached with it. But now all of a sudden after the mistrial, all of this new video is surfacing. There's a lot more evidence that's going to come in this trial, and it's going to be must-see TV, Vinny.
Yeah, another reason why this trial is going to be different. Mike Gold, Melanie Little staying with us. Up next, why didn't anyone see John O'Keefe on the lawn? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Crucial to this case is figuring out why all these witnesses in the case, you've got so many of them, yet no one witnessed the alleged murder. Here's the story. On January 29th, 2022, Karen Reed discovered the lifeless body of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, in a snowbank outside of a fellow officer's home in Canton, Massachusetts. Prosecutors allege that Reed, after a night of drinking, struck John O'Keefe with her SUV and left him to die in the blizzard. She faces charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter while operating under the influence, and leaving the scene of personal injury and death. Karen Reed pleaded not guilty, asserting that she is being framed by law enforcement to shield others involved in John O'Keefe's death. Her first trial ended in a mistrial in July of 2024 due to a hung jury. The retrial is beginning with heightened public interest and scrutiny over the investigative conduct, including the dismissal of the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, for unprofessional behavior. The case has become a focal point in discussions about justice and police accountability. I want to begin this segment talking about the scene where John O'Keefe was found, which may be the scene of the murder, if you believe prosecutors, but at a minimum, it's the scene of death where John O'Keefe is discovered. I want you to take a look at an animation. This was done by Microdots, and what it tries to demonstrate is what it would be like for someone driving down the street like the plow driver, and what you would or would not see driving past 34 Fairview. Now, obviously, it's an animation, but it does give us some sense of what we are talking about in terms of the size of John O'Keefe, where he was located, and what was found. Now, Matt Johnson, Court TV crime and justice correspondent, returned to the scene and took us there. I want to take a look at what he saw.
We're approaching the house. It's at a grade of a curve. Here's 34 Fairview. I'm turned in front of the house right now, and this is actually in front of the mailbox. So this is the position of the house in front of the mailbox. You can see the two entry doors that are constantly being talked about by these witnesses on the stand. Down the road, it turns, so anyone that was approaching from that direction, they're not going to see the front yard that much. And remember, we just made that other turn. So this is in the center of two turns, and it goes up, down. It's about a hilly neighborhood. It is hilly. And so if you're driving through here in the dark and in the snow, you might not see much. These are huge houses as they appear on TV, but the yards are very small, and it's a very dense neighborhood. You can see the flagpole is only about 7-8 feet away from where the street starts. There is no sidewalk. And you can see that from any direction that you're at in front of this house. I'm going to back up. There's no one behind me. I'm backing up to the neighbor's home. So if someone was approaching this house to pick somebody up, this is what they would be seeing as they're approaching the mailbox that we've heard about and the driveway where a lot of these witnesses were also parked. And still, you can see where John O'Keefe's body was in front of that flagpole from any direction over here. It's a very dense neighborhood, but from this flagpole and where John O'Keefe's body was, I mean, look at how close it is to this yard. And also, that is the gate where the defense showed a video from the basement doors. They lift up, they're on the side of the house. You can walk through that gate and walk right over here to the flagpole.
Matt Johnson returning to the scene there. And when you go to the scene, I think you get a much different perspective of all of this. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Why didn't anyone see John O'Keefe on the lawn? I mean, all those people coming in and out of the house, showing up, picking people up, dropping people off, getting in their cars, going home. Why didn't anyone see John O'Keefe on the lawn? Joining us, former NYPD officer, retired Nassau County Lieutenant and Commanding Officer Mike Gould, and Karen Reed supporter. She's Nurse Kim on YouTube and TikTok. Kim Whalen also with us. All right, Kim, I'm going to ask you first. From your perspective, why didn't anyone see John O'Keefe on the lawn?
You tell me, Vinnie. The Commonwealth tell me, because if you have been to 34 Fairview, and just like that beautiful job that Matt Johnson did in the drive-by reenactment, it is so incredibly close and small, and there is no way, in my humble opinion, that there was almost baker's dozen people leaving this house party that were not able to see any figure in the snow being Officer John O'Keefe.
All right, Mike, you were there. We've got some video for when you went there, and you went at nighttime. From your perspective, why didn't anyone see John O'Keefe on that lawn?
Well, I'd just offer a couple of, there I'm laying there, and as you can see, it's at nighttime, and it is a different perspective. So I would just offer just a different explanation. First of all, there was a lot of drinking going on. That's, I think, not taken into full account from 4 in the afternoon until this time. And there's something called inattentional blindness. When you're driving or walking, you're focused, you have to block out things in your peripheral vision or you can't really function. So this inattentional blindness, particularly at night, you're driving, you don't notice things like a garden hose on the lawn, particularly a human being lying flat. We're not used to seeing human beings lying flat. We're used to seeing people standing up. So my explanation is that people leaving that party are driving, they're focused, they got tunnel vision, and this lifeless object lying on the ground is very difficult to see unless you were looking for it. You wouldn't see necessarily garbage cans. You drive by these things when you go home at night. You drive down your block at night and pass things that you're not really looking at towards your neighbor's houses. And from the perspective I was at, it's not that terribly close. I could see where people could miss it just by coming in and out and not paying attention or not looking for something.
Now, there was one person driving on the road that night who was not at the party, was not drinking, and his job was to pay attention to what was on the road, and that's Brian Loughran. He is the snowplow driver. Let's take a listen.
When you made that first pass by that residence at 2:45 in the morning, sir, with your headlights on, what, if anything, did you see on the front lawn in the area of the flagpole?
I saw nothing.
If there had been a 6'2", 200-pound man lying in the snow there, would you have seen it?
Objection.
Sustained.
What time was it, to your best estimate, in terms of when you would have approached Fairview and Cedar Crest again?
3:15 to 3:30. At that point, I saw a Ford Edge on the side of the road.
Where was it parked on the side of the road?
In front of the Alberts house.
Where in front of the Alberts house?
By the flagpole.
Okay, Kim, how important is Brian Lochran in trying to determine what's going on there at that time of day?
Oh, he's incredibly important, Vinny. He is the key to what exactly the timeline is. And I recall also the Department of Public Works in Canton, Michael Trotta, going through F-150s, F-250s, and F-350s. And he knew everything about that plow route and his drivers. Lucky affirmatively tells us there was nothing there at first pass at 2:30 a.m. And the most concerning thing to me, Vinny, is if these plow routes were started at 2:30 and Karen Reed allegedly struck Officer John O'Keefe at 12:32 a.m., how did all that taillight magically land back in that yard? Not one of the plows moved any of the fragments of taillight. 45 pieces didn't get moved up the street at all with the plow routes? I don't think so.
Let's take a listen to one person who did see something when she was leaving the party. That's what she testified to. Here's Julie Nagel.
I did notice behind Sarah and Jen, I did notice something out of the ordinary, like a black blob in the ground by the flagpole.
Can you describe how big an object it was that you saw?
I'd probably say like 5 or 6 feet, like long.
And you were in a car such that if you thought that you saw something that could have been a person, all you had to do was tell the driver, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you tell the driver that you saw somebody who was in trouble?
Well, I said it out loud in the car.
So is it your testimony now that you said out loud in the car, there's a person who's in trouble?
That's not what I said, no.
You didn't mention a person at all.
All right, Mike, what do you think of the black blob?
Yeah, it's a black blob. And again, just for the record, I'm neutral on this. I think the prosecution and the defense have a lot of difficulties here, and that's what resulted in the hung jury. And unless they're changing or they're coming up with more compelling evidence on either side. So look, this might sound crazy, but I've searched for suspects in the darkness of night. And I've actually was stepping on them because they were motionless and they were in dark clothing under my feet in a vegetated area, and I was stepping on them. And it was only my police dog that alerted to me that I was standing on a human being. So it's nighttime, vision, alcohol, all these things pay an effect. And I'd say the same regarding the snowplow operator. I know it's almost hard to believe in hindsight, no pun intended, we can look and see these things. But when you're driving home at night in a snowstorm or in the rain, when I drove through there, it was raining out. And it's just hard to focus on the road, let alone. So yeah, different circumstances, different conditions. But I can see some reasonableness in it's not that mystifying to me that nobody could see it.
Mike Gould, Kim Whalen, great to have you both on the program. Thank you so much. Still to come, how different will the openings be this time around?
How much input do you have on the opening statement?
It's collaborative all the way around. Alan owns it.
You feel that? The NWSL is on ION.
It's game time.
Showing off a little skill now, Kansas! The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long. Find ION wherever you watch.
ION, it's on.
You told police you shot him twice in the head.
I could have killed everybody in that building, and I didn't.
You think you should get some kind of credit for not killing people?
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
How do you feel about Hank Brennan planning to use your interviews in his opening statement? Come at me.
That's what your dad said?
You sound like your dad. I may have seen it. I would not have said anything that I wouldn't say again.
See the 15-second clip that the prosecution plans to play?
I did.
What's it show?
Yeah, what is it? Nothing that phases me in any way.
Can you tell us?
I don't think I can, no. I've been ready. I have no choice but to be ready. I feel strong. I've got an amazing team, and I'm anxious. Jonathan. Yeah.
How much input do you have on the opening statement?
It's collaborative all the way around. Alan owns it, and he's always open to input and layers more of input, but it's ultimately Alan's, and Alan we all trust, but we've all given input.
So there you hear Karen Reed talking about the opening statement, and she's talking about Alan Jackson giving that opening statement. Well, take a look. We got a little change in what's going to happen this time around. Hank Brennan, the new prosecutor, will deliver the opening statement for them. And then you've got Alan Jackson, instead of David Yannetti, will be delivering the opening statement for the defense. So things will change a little bit. Let's give you a little flavor of Alan Jackson versus Hank Brennan.
The first trial, I'll note, was riddled with what we believe to be inadmissible and highly, highly prejudicial testimony from a bunch of witnesses who took the opportunity to describe harassment and distress that they felt from third parties, both on social media and otherwise. No third party, including any blogger, any social media personality, any member of the public, no third party speaks for Ms. Reed.
I can appreciate the defense wanting to identify the line in which they would open the door to evidence about harassment and abuse of witnesses. I understand why that would be important. But to convert that into a speech that absolutely defies reality and grossly misstates the history and facts of this case is beyond me.
He said that I stood up here just a second ago and attacked witnesses and bashed witnesses and made fraudulent statements. Was he listening?
All right, that brings us to the next question in our investigation. This is one everyone's wondering about. How different will openings be? This time around, it's Alan Jackson, Hank Brennan. What is going to change? Joining us, longtime Massachusetts attorney, was a prosecutor for 20 years, including as homicide chief in Norfolk County in that same courthouse where all this is taking place. Rick Grundy's with us, and attorney Melanie Little. She's Melanie Little on YouTube, and she is here with us as well. Melanie, I'll begin with you. Ladies first. What do you think? How different this time around?
I mean, I have to say, first of all, David Yannetti's opening during the first trial was one of the best openings I've ever seen, but it is a really good idea to change it up this time and to throw, something new at the prosecution. And Alan Jackson is passionate. He's engaging. He knows how to grab and hold attention. I think instead of focusing on Karen Reed was framed, I think this time the focus should be on John O'Keefe was not hit by a car. I think it's a tough sell for a lot of the jurors, and they have the benefit this time, the defense does, of some of the jurors having given interviews. I think that now they know what the jury was hanging some of their reasonable doubt on or lack of reasonable doubt on, and I think that what it needs to be this time is John O'Keefe was not hit by a car. Something else happened. But the injuries to John O'Keefe do not line up with the pedestrian versus motor vehicle accident. They just don't. Something else happened. We don't know exactly what it is. And here's a picture of his arm, because we've learned now that they want to show a picture of John O'Keefe's right arm in their opening, which indicates a dog attack, which the experts for the defense are going to say are dog bites.
Rick, what are your thoughts here? Let's take a look at the prosecutors.
Well,
how are things going to change for them?
Let me first say, Vinny, this is a big couple of days here in Boston, Massachusetts. We had just celebrated the 250th year since the Concord-Lexington battle, the first fight in the Revolutionary War, and we followed that up with our marathon today and celebrating Patriots Day, which is why I have my flag tie on. So it's natural to follow it with those infamous times of Boston with the Karen Reed second trial. I agree and disagree with Melanie. I think they need to refocus that from what was a very powerful opening statement to take into heart the most important thing that a juror said, and that was, I don't know what happened, so we couldn't choose a story and decide. I don't know what happened is not guilty. And that's what they have to focus on. I think if you switch it just to the injury, you're still putting yourself in that spider's web where you have deflated that burden of proof from the Commonwealth. And they're there thinking we have to pick one of these two stories. There's a lot wrong with this Commonwealth case, and I think that's what your opening statement should be. The cell phones getting thrown away, the injuries not consistent. But we're not saying that proves to you what happened. We're saying it proves that what the Commonwealth needs to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt did not happen. The prosecution, they've got a lot more room to go up, I think, in their opening statements. And I think you'll see that from Hank Brennan. I don't anticipate Hank Brennan to be overly theatrical, loud, bombastic, but I think he will put a cogent story, breathing some life into it, and logic that wasn't there in their opening statement. And the prosecution always has more to gain in a retrial. There's always surprises coming from the defense side, starting with whether the defendant will testify or not, and on through their discovery. It's just not as thorough as the Commonwealth need do. So they are in a better position, I think, to weave in what that defense was as need be. But my feeling is here is that can the defense, so wed to this alternate theory, can they pull back far enough to rely on what a defendant's greatest defense is?
They didn't prove it. We don't know what happened.
I don't have to prove anything.
Melanie, we have about 20 seconds left here. How important will these openings be?
So important because the jury is going to pay attention from jump. They are going to be so engaged. They're going to want to focus. They're going to want to pay attention. Reasonable doubt needs to be hammered home for the defense. Reasonable doubt, bad investigation. Therefore, you cannot find my client guilty.
Melanie Little, Rick Grundy, great to have you aboard. Thank you so, so much. Get ready, folks. This trial will be much different second time round. You could see some witnesses, perhaps with a little different testimony. You may not see or hear some of the witnesses from the first trial. And with these lawyers, expect some new evidence and some new arguments. Everything is at stake, and both sides, trust me, in this case, want desperately to win. The question is, can either side convince all 12 jurors? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.